Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here and welcome to BBallBreakdown. Are you a basketball nerd? Chances are that you are. That's probably why you're here. Well, if you're a nerd, it's not far of a stretch to get to becoming a geek. And I've got an app for you called SeatGeek. And boy, is it a terrific place to get tickets for concerts or sporting events. And you can save $20 off your first purchase if you use my code BBall. So get in the settings and enter BBall and save some money. It gives you a vantage point of the seat, which is really cool. And it grades the price and lets you know if it's a good price or not. So head over to our friends over at SeatGeek and use my code and get over to those sporting events. Well, now let's talk about LBJ versus LB. Larry Bird and LeBron James has been an interesting conversation on Twitter recently, and let me make one thing really clear. LeBron James has the highest basketball IQ of anybody in his generation, I think, or certainly the top two. And I think it might even get him in trouble because he thinks he knows a lot more than the coach does, which is debatable. Maybe he does. But either way, I want to make that clear as I make a nice comparison between him and Larry Bird's career and how they were very different but equally valuable and productive on the court. So if you want to dismiss Larry Bird so quickly because the footage of him is getting grainier and grainier every year that goes by, take a second, check out this argument, and then see what you think between Larry Bird and LeBron James. When examining the career of LeBron James, you have to start with his body. At 6'9" and chiseled like a statue, his raw power and explosion is awe-inspiring, and the majority of his defining plays are ferocious dunks that reduce other professionals to whimpering children scurrying for cover as his flying death machine strafes the NBA landscape. While there is no question he's got serious skill, it's his athletic ability that has allowed him to ascend to the top of the game and stay there for so many years. Larry Bird also has had his share of dunks, and it's usually forgotten that before injuries took their toll, Bird could move around the court pretty well, and while he doesn't necessarily elevate too high, he had no problem getting to the basket and finishing up near the rim amongst the trees. Let's start out by looking at their passing. Both have extraordinary numbers at the forward position. And while you might glance at this number and assume LeBron is the better passer, it's important to dive into the footage to see the similarities and subtle differences that exist between them. Both had a flair for the entertaining pass, looking for ways to quickly get the ball to an open teammate before the defense can close in. Sometimes the overhead pass is the only way to get it there. And Bird was unparalleled at creative ways to deliver that ball from over his head. And neither player was worried about getting down on the floor after loose balls, always with their heads up to get the ball to a streaking teammate. A great way to measure basketball IQ and incredible court vision is the use of the touch pass, indicating you are 2 steps ahead of the play and see things that mere mortals do not. However, Bird seemed to take this to a different level, almost as if he was 1 or 2 steps ahead of the play, and also with a total lack of inhibition, willing to risk throwing these passes at any time, providing Celtics fans with a lot of oohs and ahs on a nightly basis. And even on the defensive side, he had the IQ to not only see where the pass is going, but to get it right to a teammate immediately. From the post, they both had a flair for finding openings in unconventional ways, but Bird gets the edge here for sheer volume of post-ups, something he got the opportunity to do much more often in the low post heavy 80s. Both LeBron and Larry could thread the needle better than just about anybody else in the league, with a brilliant mixture of both touch, accuracy, and power. And LeBron's immense strength allowed him to make long, down-court passes right on the numbers, be it an overhead bounce pass from 35 feet, or even 60 feet, or a full-court baseball pass right in the hands. And Bird maximized his athletic ability by being ahead of the play and possessing the most accurate baseball pass of all time. LeBron definitely had a sense of entertainment when he could dazzle the audience with no-look passes, or flying behind-the-back dimes to bigs down low, or wrap-around lasers to get you out of your seat. Bird didn't have that kind of athletic ability, but he'd scrap for the loose balls and still had the presence of mind to find a pass to a teammate who could score, all while on his back. Any deficit he had as an athlete, he more than made up for in heart, desire, and smarts. Speaking of heart, one of the reasons Larry Bird's career was marred with injury was his uncompromising will to go after loose balls. I'm sure he wouldn't have had it any other way, but these spills, while inspiring, also cut years off his career in a way LeBron never did. Since he was so fast to begin with, he'd get these balls before it got too close to the sideline. Looking at their scoring, they both filled up the nets with comparable numbers, and at their heights, they could lead the league in scoring no matter how good their teammates were. However, there wasn't too much similarity in the way they scored. It was clear Larry had to score by any means necessary. He didn't blow by guys regularly, so he needed to keep defenders off balance with great ball fakes and shot fakes, which stemmed from his killer jump shot, which extended all the way to three-point range. The defense had to pick him up as early as possible, or he'd stick a dagger right in their eye. While it might not have been as aesthetically pleasing as a Jordan or Dr. J, he simply had it. The ability to make shots from all over the court, any angle, at any time. And aside from the similarities between these few shots, the contrast of LeBron's scoring couldn't be bigger. While the 80s was dominated by cutting and post-ups, LeBron's era allowed him all sorts of pick and roll opportunities out top. And once he got going downhill, there were very few defenses that could have any hope of stopping him once he took off from the dotted line on in. And his teams have always provided him with ample opportunities to isolate on his man one-on-one whenever he wanted. And while he's had moments of being effective from deep, without question, he's made his living on sizing up his defender, putting his head down, and just downshifting toward the hoop on a path of rim destruction. Another big difference is in transition. Bird would be part of a team fast break and could finish with the best of them, but LeBron was always a one-man transition game, the rare player who simply couldn't be stopped unless bear-hugged by two defenders and practically brought down to the ground. One area Larry was far superior in was his use of the left hand. There were sections of whole games where he'd only shoot with his offhand, and he had such control and touch with it, you'd never know exactly how to guard him once you got within 10 feet of the basket. I can't think of another player who used his ability to score with his offhand as often as Bird did, and even 25 years later, these are still the most impressive of his highlights, something LeBron cannot do. As for rebounding, Bird was simply better at it, a testament to his tenacity and footwork since he wasn't getting above the rim to snatch rebounds, but he consistently grabbed more boards per game his entire career. While the spacing was different back then and small forwards got to hang around the basket more, he still seemed more willing than LeBron to mix it up down low and grab the ball any way he could. As for shooting, their overall field goal percentages are remarkably similar. But as we showed earlier, LeBron does the vast majority of his damage near the rim, where Larry was able to match the field goal percentage by taking many more shots from outside. As for the outside shooting, this isn't really close, and the only reason his three-point numbers aren't gaudier is the simple fact that hardly any threes were taken back then, much less practiced. And yet Bird still shot over 40% 5 times, including 2 50-40-90 seasons. Bird was consistently among the best free throw shooters each season, while LeBron's best year at the line was still 6 points lower than Bird's worst year. Defensively, there wasn't much of a contest. At his height, LeBron would guard 4 positions, filling whatever role they needed from shutting down the point guard to handling the power forward down low. His most profound finals moment wasn't an offensive move, but an incredible block that saved Game 7 for the Cavs. And while he doesn't bring this kind of dominance consistently anymore, he's got it in him when he needs to call upon it. Bird was a smart defender and knew how to use his positioning to make up for his lack of quickness and strength. Interestingly, if you look at defensive win shares, Larry Bird actually ranks ahead of LeBron James by 1 spot. And that's because all of his basketball genius we saw on the offensive end translated to the defensive side of the ball as well. And when he was young and healthy, he made some plays that might, just might, remind you of some of the things we saw LeBron do. His quick hands allowed him to strip the ball, and in fact, he averaged the same amount of steals per game that LeBron does now. He was in the average to a little above average rank on defense, and when coupled with his elite offensive production, his overall impact on the game was still remarkable. In fact, looking at a modern stat like value over replacement player, Bird ranks 9th all-time in the NBA. That said, LeBron James ranks 1st all-time in his category, right above Michael Jordan. And that brings us to clutch performance. Those moments when everyone in the building knows who's getting the ball, and as that clock winds down, do you have the clutch gene to nail the shot? While we don't have the advanced stats from Bird's era, we're going to have to use anecdotal evidence to show that time and again, the Celtics went to him in the waning seconds of the game, and it was a rare occasion when he didn't come through for them. At the very least, there was never ever a time when Bird was afraid to shoot the ball in those pressure situations. He would inevitably find some way to get open. Remember, they would hardly ever run a straight isolation out top and have him create off the dribble. Bird would flash open, find some sort of sliver of daylight, and get the jumper off. Again, these were moments when going to the basket wasn't preferable because the referees would definitely let the players decide these games. Foul calls were hard to come by, so it made more sense to do your best to get off a clean look from the outside. And Larry Bird was as good as anyone in this era with his knack for being in the right place at the right time, dropping in shots from all angles and degree of difficulty. LeBron's clutchiness is a bit more complicated. Of course, he spent the first 7 years of his career on some pretty bad teams where he was forced to do it all. And he did have moments where he came through for him. He was also criticized at times for not taking the game-winning shot, even though I will defend him on some of these for making the right basketball play, something he's always been focused on doing to his credit. However, there have been a few times where he hasn't been the man down the stretch, and it has opened him up to quite a bit of criticism for not being that clutch player. Mark Stein wrote an article on ESPN.com about this, and with the help of advanced analytics and play-by-play data, we can quantify how LeBron has shot when attempting a tying or go-ahead shot in the final 5 seconds of the fourth quarter or overtime. As of March 1st of this year, he was a very mortal 5 for 47, or 10.6% over the past 10 seasons, whereas the league average on these shots is 22.7%. Of course, his finals performance over the last 3 games this year did a lot to silence any critics on this matter, as he was the catalyst for an event that had never been done in the finals before, coming back from a 3-1 deficit and leading both teams in points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. They each have 3 titles, and Bird was Finals MVP twice, while LeBron won it 3 times. So in the end, can we even make a fair comparison of 2 players from completely different eras? While Bird was doing the mullet, LeBron was doing the headband. And basketball isn't always about who's the strongest and fastest and highest jumper. Before his body began to break down, Bird wasn't as bad an athlete as he's made out to be. And we can't blame him for getting injured. LeBron has benefited from the miracles of modern science. It's been remarkable how long he's played without serious injury. If you want to weigh the volume of production as a deciding factor, then there's no question that LeBron James is better than Larry Bird. But if you want to look at sheer ability to make plays while at the height of their careers, then I'm not so sure it's that clear cut. Larry definitely had more skill, while LeBron brought more physical gifts. At the very least, it's a question you have to ponder long and hard with before making your decision.